Good morning. I'm quite in the mood for testing out some emulation, and ever since I've been having issues with one of my old Xboxes, I figured let's delve into original Xbox emulation a bit more. So I managed to capture quite a few of my Xbox discs and see how Xemu is getting along, and I'll switch the screen in a bit. Let me see, and I'll open the Xemu website, the Xemu, like so, and I'll do a screen. Oh, and I've got to edit this out. Screen 16:9, like so, and that just does the display capture too, and that's display this one. Yeah, alrighty. So this emulator, Xemu. It's a free and open source application that emulates the original Xbox console, and it actually is based upon Qemu, Qemu. This one, which basically is a virtualizer of some sorts. So let's fire up Xemu. Microsoft Xemu. And it takes a bit for it to start, I think. Yeah. I'm running this on a spinning hard drive, I believe. And one of the drives in my system still is a spinning drive. So you can select Vulkan or OpenGL. And this is Halo. There is some corruption going on. Let's reset that. Yeah. So let's see how that works. Let's turn down the volume of the computer, so normal. And what also helps is to have some sort of video debugging information going on. Now, the most limiting factors of Xemu running on any system are the instructions per clock cycle, and that has to be really high. And what also is a limiting factor is what of the NVIDIA type hardware calls, graphics calls, are actually emulated on the system. And I think it's 16:9, but let's do it like that, because a lot of the graphics are actually still 4:3 in this generation.
Chief, please look around the room. I need to get a calibration reading for your battlesuit's diagnostics.
So as you can see, this really basically is 30 frames per second solid. And I remember getting the Xbox, the original Xbox, and playing Halo, and I was totally amazed by how well it all performed. Let's get that a bit over to the side. We could actually go full screen. Yeah, it's better. So we got to follow the dude to the optical diagnostics.
I know the ordnance techs usually take care of your targeting sensors, but we're short of time, Chief. Just look at each of the flashing panels to target them.
So this is actually a way to set your controller to the best looking and functioning setting, and a lot of people try the other way. Yeah, that's better. Leave it like it is. So pitch normal, that actually works best for me. For other folk, this actually might not work. In later versions of the Xbox 360, I believe that they actually use profiles. So your preferred settings are actually similar across more than just one game, which basically would work best. I would love to have some sort of universal type of control where, you know, certain actions within certain games are actually quite similarly mapped. Now, from what I gather, this actually runs pretty much perfect. There are a lot of the special effects and reflections and stuff, they all work well.
Captain, we'll have to skip the weapons diagnostics tonight.
Oh, and then the dude gets attacked.
Skipper seems jumpy. We better get moving. We'll find the weapons later.
Yeah, so he gets attacked.
Sam! Sam! Come on, we've got to get the hell out of here.
Oh, it's just slightly in view. Yeah, okay, let's move.
This way.
Yeah. Explosion, explosion, explosion. Oh no. And then we just enter this one. We got another one. It opens up. Whoop. And I have to duck underneath. So depressing a thumbstick. The first time I played this with the Duke, which is a humongous controller. Oh. Yeah, I'm gonna just run towards the... oh, and I have this... I'm just gonna run towards the bridge. Now I know what's going to happen, so I just advance beyond what this little dude from the beginning of the screen wants me to do. I just run towards the bridge. Now in later releases, the voice acting and actually the character models are actually quite different, and I quite like these first ones. Reload. Okay, so there's no grabbing their guns yet. Oh, that's friendly fire. But yeah, I mean, this is one of these games that has the enemies attacking in set sequences and stuff. So the more you play it, the more you'll be able to just do speed runs and stuff. You know where the enemies are going to be. Of course, they respond on the way you go about the levels, but yeah, there's quite a fair bit of scripting going on. Oh, friendly fire. But yeah, let's check out another game, because this actually works pretty well. There's a lot of games actually that... oh yeah, and if you want to befriend me on Insignia, this is my call sign. Let's load a disk. What else? Oh, Outrun, the original Outrun. That used to run at low 20s. Let's see how that actually runs. you have to get the focus proper. So this version of the emulator is 0847. Now this game, some would argue, is the game that looks the best on the Xbox. The arcade boards actually used either PCs or Xbox-like hardware. The thing is, emulating an original Xbox, one would think it to be quite easy, you know, because it's said that it's just a PC. But it isn't. It isn't. It doesn't have any specific BIOS. Oh, look, this is just going at 60 frames per second. Now, I do have quite a fast system where this is running on. It's a Ryzen 3000 series with 12 cores. So it's one of these Ryzen 9s, but it's one of the first Ryzen 9s ever, I believe. I don't think the 2000 series actually had a Ryzen 9. So 24 threads, actually that works great when you wanna have PlayStation 3 emulation going, because that actually uses quite a fair bit of threads. But yeah, you see, it's not 100%, and I do think that the setting of this game is actually 16:9. Let's see. Yeah, because the tail lights of the car look less squashed, but then the circle of the speedometer actually is a bit stretched. But as you can see, there's a lot of areas where it's actually pretty much full speed. Now, a lot of features of the NVIDIA graphics, it's more or less a GeForce graphics card, have been implemented into OpenGL and Vulkan calls, but they've not all been optimized. So the optimization is progressing quite wonderfully, but because of that, you really need a fast computer with a huge number of clock cycles per instructions per clock cycle. And yeah, basically you can't just run Xbox code natively on a PC environment and have, you know, like Windows, and have the system calls, you know. I mean, it does run a version of DirectX and a sort of Windows kernel, but then it's all, you know, the memory is mapped differently. The integration of the GPU and the CPU are different. The CPU itself, it's a Celeron-like CPU that also has different, some different aspects to it, like code runs in a different way, or certain calls are not possible in other systems. So yeah, and timing issues, of course. And even in an integrated system like this, because you can increase the resolution to to twice, so that's more or less 720p. So this actually looks quite nice. Doesn't impact performance that much, I think. Yeah, this with the level, this is, for example, something that shows you that memory management is actually quite different. It takes a while for the new memory to get cached. So yeah, let's leave it at that and check out the other Outrun, which is Outrun 2 Coast to Coast, because that actually is quite a different beast. Let's reset that. Oh, it already did. Let's keep it at 16:9. In reality, my original Xbox I also set at 16:9. This actually ran pretty decent on Xemu, even when it was still a lot less developed. Continuous course. Let's turn down the splash wave. Because this actually uses a different engine. It does take much longer loading in. And what you see is that they actually use more bloom, or a different type of bloom, and you see on the edges of the screen that there are bits of blobs present, and bloom isn't implemented correctly. But for the most part, I believe this game actually has fewer slowdowns than the original. And it might be due to the fact that the graphics engine is a bit different, and the calls that it makes to the virtual NVIDIA graphics card are actually optimized more. Also, when the level changes, it's a bit smoother. So the way Xemu performs actually depends very much on which system calls are being made and whether or not they have been optimized and or implemented. Compatibility of the Xemu emulator is actually quite high, stating a lot of games as playable, but that depends very much on your computer. And I have not seen it run very well on many older systems, like 5 to 6 to 10 years old. It is surprisingly hefty when it comes to system requirements for it to run well. But yeah, you have these little bumps in the way the new level is loaded. But yeah, bloom is implemented because you see some sort of glowing effect. It's like an overexposure of the camera. And looking at this and looking at prior versions of the emulator, you can actually see that a lot of graphics calls have been improved and or implemented, so the games more or less look more and more like they are supposed to. And this actually performs quite consistently on this system. It's there is a micro stutter, but that's only when you really are susceptible to that, if you know. But yeah, for the most part, this is actually quite a smooth experience. The emulator recognizes Xbox 360, Xbox controllers, or other human interface device controllers like the PlayStation ones and stuff, pretty much flawlessly, and it actually maps the appropriate buttons on the controller. So you actually get, on a PlayStation controller, you get buttons having a similar function that are closest to the position of the buttons on an Xbox 360 or Xbox controller. Shihiro actually is the arcade board that this Outrun 2 actually ran on. Later iterations of this game actually use a PC, a regular PC that runs Windows, and with basically it's a Windows executable, and the interface, the graphics are pretty much standard DirectX things, calls. but the interface, of course, it's a steering wheel and a shift and stuff. That's all proprietary. But also, again, pretty much USB implementation of very specific controls. So you would not be able to just run that executable on a PC without it causing issues with alternative ways of controlling it. You really need to map the steering wheel to something else, but there's emulators actually taking care of that. But still, I think running this is running at a higher resolution, that twice the resolution that the original PlayStation was intended for, but actually it works pretty well. You could actually, on a modified Xbox, you can actually output HD video, especially if you use a component cable, which sadly only is possible on NTSC models, because component is not enabled on PAL Xboxes. So for us in Europe and PAL country, it actually was pretty much mandatory to modify your Xbox in order to have an experience that was available to other parts of the world, but not to ours. Ever since that generation, PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, after that generation, PAL versus NTC really didn't matter that much, because of HD video, the resolution became the same, 1080p, 720p. And before that, PAL and NTSC, the standard definition really is quite a surprising thing, because the PAL standard definition signal, the PAL standard definition signal actually is about only 20% different from 720p resolution, whereas and that's because the vertical resolution is 576 lines, whereas the NTSC standard video signal is 480p, 480 interlaced, and it's an interlaced signal. So yeah, it's and that's also one of the reasons why HD ready flat screen TVs really weren't adopted by a lot of people, because, well, the differences weren't that stark. But then again, it only the 60 frames per second, 50 frames per second difference, that's actually the thing that actually remains to this day. But even with Dreamcast and PlayStation, GameCube, you could actually have what they call PAL 60. So the game actually offered you to run the game at 60 hertz instead of 50 hertz, so that you had the same speed. Because prior to that, on the Super Nintendo, the TurboGrafx, many of the home computer systems, in order to run at full frame and be able to use the complete vertical resolution, they needed to make the systems run slower, and often a more squashed in image was the case. On the Commodore 64, it's very noticeable. The screen on an NTSC system is much more square, whereas it's much more rectangular, almost widescreen-like on a PAL TV or monitor. And I think the HD TV, LCD TV, that really changed a lot for PAL gamers, because we basically got similar games or the same games, and comparing high scores, you know, on PAL Commodore 64 games and the game running on an NTSC Commodore 64, like these arcade games. In the early days of YouTube, you know, high score challenges, it really mattered a lot whether or not you would play it on a PAL system or an NTSC system. So yeah, those scores weren't really compatible. And you would say, well, you know, these PAL gamers, they have it easier because, you know, basically their systems run 20% slower, which is actually the case. And it's not very noticeable on certain systems. On the TurboGrafx, for example, there's a TurboGrafx 16 release, PAL release, but they PC Engine really didn't. How do you say it? Didn't have a proper presence in PAL country because, yeah, the units were made, but they sort of got stuck in a warehouse. And later on, I believe in the 2000s, it became known that there was this huge TurboGrafx 16 PAL new stock, unsold stock available, and I actually managed to get one. Of course, the hue cards are different from the PC Engine, but they're the same as the American TurboGrafx 16. But the games really run a lot slower, so it's a very lazy way to implement the same system. It actually ran 20% slower. So comparing high scores on a PAL ColecoVision and an NTSC ColecoVision, like, you know, like an arcade game, it really is not. It really isn't the same game. It runs a lot slower on PAL, and the argument often is that, yeah, these PAL games run slower, so it's easier to get a better high score, which actually is not the case, because if you play arcade games, you really need that twitch reflex thing. And that actually works best when your reflexes are pulled at a consistent and fast rate. And if you pull them at a slower rate, you get more time to think, more time to sort of doubt what you're doing. So actually, I find the slower PAL games to be tougher because your thinking gets in the way. Yeah, and sometimes a game actually is easier because, well, it's just easier because it moves slower, but it depends on how twitch, arcadey, twitch reflex. Shooters, they often don't translate very well. Platformers don't really matter that much, especially if it considers if it's using pixel perfect platform jumping. But then again, there's a whole thing where games that were developed in Europe during the video game crash in the States, and possibly also Canada. Yeah, we played our computer games, basically ports of. Yeah, that is something that is not a good thing. It really has a hard time keeping up, and then it just skips a whole bunch of frames, and then it just drops you smack in the middle of the other track, and actually quite a far ways in even. Ooh. So yeah, so it's not perfect yet. Maybe that the system actually isn't implementing caching. So I mean, if the system really has to load in a lot of memory, it doesn't happen in parallel, but it happens just, you know, whoops, we're gonna load this block of memory, and the whole system just freezes and continues. In a way, it continues and just skips a bit. I'm not sure how multi-threaded this emulator actually is. So yeah, but this actually runs great. So yeah, let's not finish it. Let's just check out another game on the Xbox. Eject disk, and then you have to just reset it. Load disk. Let me see. Burnout. Burnout is also quite a nice game. It's quite fun to compare these. I think this really needs to be set to 4:3 because it's not a widescreen game. I own this on GameCube, PlayStation, Xbox, and now I'm emulating it. And it's surprisingly similar on all of them. And I guess for the most part, these systems, yeah, I mean the screen does look squished in a bit, but that's actually on the original also. So yeah, so this card that just looks squished in. So expand it. Yeah, this looks like it's supposed to look. Whoops. But yeah, this just runs at 60 frames per second, I think. Yeah. Pretty much consistently. So yeah, a lot of the system calls are actually implemented correctly. So a lot of games actually work quite well. But you'll have the occasional hiccup every once in a while when it encounters system calls that are not specific. And yeah, there's this whole thing of system calls that you can actually have show being emulated and stuff. But yeah, it just takes up a lot of screen real estate, and it really actually doesn't. This little debug is actually within the main window, so it doesn't really go outside. Colin McRae Rally. These games were really tough to emulate on the PlayStation. They were just barely moving forward. I have this on PC, so there's a lot of how do you say that, cross publication, PC, Xbox, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360. So I'm still running this at an increased resolution. Championship, yeah, sure. Continue. Slot mark 1, load. And the thing is, a lot of these games from the early 2000s, they allow me to pick the Subaru Impreza, and actually that is one of my favorite cars when it comes to rally racing games. So, and the thing is that I really played a lot of rally racing games in the early 2000s, also on the PlayStation, the 90s, and this Subaru really is nice. So let's see how this actually works, because this didn't run well before because of the graphics being quite something. Let's change to the in-car view, because that actually, is it possible? Yeah, that actually is a lot faster, so it has to draw less geometry. On the real system, it actually doesn't matter whether you are, for the speed, whether you are, because you can see if certain graphics calls aren't implemented and optimized, and if you take them away, it really is quite a big difference on how the game runs, because now it actually runs pretty much native speed. So actually you'll be able to get a decent score on it, and actually the system, yeah, you can actually sort of play it like it is on the real system. But if you change the view to external, it just starts to chug. Oh, and that doesn't happen on a real system. Let's go back. So it's like 20 frames less. And that is not the case when it comes to That's not the case when it comes to a real machine. So yeah, those are the differences. Eject. Load disk. The Need for Speed games are also quite interesting. Gauntlet, Dark Legacy. That's also I believe that's an N64 type of board, arcade board. Half-Life, Halo, Hitman. Let me see, another one, Lara Croft, Lego Star Wars. Yeah, a lot of these Star Wars games actually run quite nicely. Midnight Club, Midtown Madness. Yeah, this basically was also quite a nice game on Windows. It was one of the first 3D DirectX games that I really liked. Because you were actually driving in real cities that are somehow recognizable. And I lived in the States for a bit back in the day, in the 90s. So I got to experience, actually I got to experience Washington, D.C. So I know what it looks like in reality. And you recognize certain bits, so that's nice. And Metropolis Street Racer also did that to some extent. Project Gotham Racing really did show you. Well, oh, I should try that in a bit. So there are issues with upscaling here. But I believe this actually is the I think this is the gallery, you know, so basically you'll be able to go to the White House and stuff, I think. Not sure, but so this must be the reflective pool somewhere. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but there's this memorial thing going on. Whoop. So yeah, this really is. If you upscale it, it's not properly on. Let's do Metropolis Street Racer, because that's also one that is a Project Gotham Racing, for example. Project Gotham Racing, that's also one that is a slow beast, because it really has some fancy graphics. Also, the difference between in-car view and exterior car view is huge when it comes to this game. So for the emulator, probably rendering the car graphics still is taking quite a fair bit of compute cycles, so yeah, it makes the emulator run slower. Let's create a new one, just to have the first experience. Continue. Yeah, continue. Arcade race. Easy, San Francisco, Pier Run, Mini Cooper. Now, rendering this in prior versions of the emulator, this really would slow down, but not anymore. This is also one of the first scenes that's sped up, so I'm not sure what happens there. This would actually be very slow. And now, oh wow, oh this is actually quite something. This would really be like half the frame rate. It still dips. It still dips substantially, I guess, but the geometry on screen is actually quite impressive, and you really see it dip down. But they have implemented, I think, a lot of routines that made it less. Yeah, so let's change the camera. This is a much more consistent, whoops, and you can actually see that a lot of the reflections and stuff are used. Yeah, and these are the docks. I think on the left, on the right, you actually, beyond that, you have part of the bay. And I always forget what it's called. It's like this blue collar bit, blue collar worker bit. Yeah, but you get to slide around more. But yes, you can see the frame rate is more consistent. So the exterior car view really takes up more cycles, and the difference on a real system actually isn't that much. I mean, you have these type of differences on PC games, you know, where the exterior car view sometimes is slower. But you have to remember that a lot of these games actually were coded pretty much spot on to the hardware. No, there's still slowdowns. So it basically had to perform at its best on the stock hardware. So let's see how the repeat works, the replay. Yeah, this actually looks a lot better. The colors are more vibrant, so they're using a better palette, and also things like the reflection and transparency are working actually a lot better. And this actually still is running at the increased resolution, so this actually would not have been possible with previous versions of the emulator, so it has come a long way. London. This is actually very, very similar to Metropolis Street Racer on the Dreamcast. It's its successor. Now this actually runs very smooth and consistently on a real system. But this actually is one of my favorite games to run on the system. And on a CRT, these visuals, they look very good. They have some excellent lighting conditions going on, great geometry, and remember, on a standard definitions CRT, this would just look amazing. And it's not like super, I mean, it does slow down, but it's doable. I'm not sure how they managed it, but even if it slows down, the game continues to run fluid, only slower. So I guess it's a cycle exact type of emulation thing that is going on. There's no frame skips. Other emulators use. You can't actually set frame skips, none whatsoever. It's just you really can't tweak any speed settings at all. Overclock the the CPU or the graphics engine or something like that. But this actually runs too slow. Still, eject, reset, load. Project Gotham Racing 2 actually would not run or boot at all, or crash, and now it does run. But also it is too slow. But I guess these games, they are among the best looking games on the system, which Mark's game, no, I don't want to connect, single player, World Racing, Compact Sports Series. Yeah, let's do that one. The one-on-one in Florence. Yeah. Auto transmission. Novice. Audio. Now, I've been to Florence. And yeah. This plaza actually looks like this. And there's this church where you drive by, which has a very distinct checkered look, and it actually is that church. So this actually is the better view, because I'm not sure. Oh, there it is. It doesn't really change that much. But yeah, as you can see, there's so much thing going on. And actually, this used to run a bit better before, so I guess they probably have implemented, because it looks stellar. You actually see rays being cast, God rays you see being cast through the openings. So they probably have been implementing a lot of GPU functions, but that actually they're not optimized yet, so they sort of slow it down more. But yeah, I mean, if this runs 100%, yeah, you should actually look at this, I guess. And continue. And I guess the functions that have the most jagged lines are actually functions that have, yeah, it's the shader bits that have issues. And if you go to OpenGL, it might actually be vastly different. And I think it is actually. It does run faster. So there's a difference between system calls that are transferred to OpenGL. Oh, this actually almost is playable now. But this church, this white and black checkered church actually is very recognizable. The reflection of the sunlight on the street and stuff, that actually looks, especially on a CRT, this basically looks like real video. Also, the before the shop windows would just be dull. They would have their the insides of the rooms behind them. They would be visible, but now there's this reflection going on it, and yeah, birds flying. There's a lot of stuff happening. Even the traffic lights, the traffic signs, I mean, sorry, they look different. So there's a lot more stuff going on, being emulated properly, and it really starts to show off how excellent the Xbox actually is. Oh, let's yeah, I wanna check out Need for Speed. Oh, full screen and then load. Need for Speed, yeah, come on. Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2. And we have to dial down the music, I guess, but yeah, this game I played a ton on the PC. Let's let's turn down the music. And let's see if I can... yeah, so options, music volume is very low, raise engine volume false for sound effects. Yeah. So I can enhance the sound again. And let's go hot pursuit. And then just Lotus Elise delivery. And of course that needs to be a red one. And this pretty much looks on par with the PC version. Now this actually does run at a higher resolution than the Xbox would, but it's quite capable of it. Oh, I remember I didn't set the debug video like so. Make it shorter, make it smaller, like so. Resume race. So there are some calls that are not implemented yet. I guess the MSPF also is indicative of that. I'm not sure, but found those. But it does run quite consistently, and this is a nice game. I really liked this after the outings on the PlayStation, because of the alternate routes and the huge number of tracks. Also the police chases, which can be bloody irritating. But yeah, then let's check out that underground thing, because that these underground games, they really look very nice. Need for Speed, Underground 2. Let's see how these run. And again I have to, for a bit, turn off the music, and in the settings I'll turn off the soundtracks, because there's a lot of licensed music going on, like Snoop Dogg. And well, I like Snoop Dogg. Game menu music volume, game music volume, like so. Go back and just do a quick race and do a circuit, resort loop, forward. Yeah, and there's very little choice. So let's see how this runs, because this actually is one of the better looking games. It really holds up well. I guess it looks best on a CRT, because the low resolution textures, they really show. Oops. And this actually looks best if you watch it from the outside of the car. But again, this is available on the PlayStation 2, GameCube, PC, and Xbox. And yeah, it being a multi-platform game, it's not really optimized, I guess, but it does allow for some amazing cityscapes and great racing. And as you can see, I guess this was one of the games that had a lot of the function calls, graphical function calls emulated. So like on a regular system, it really doesn't matter that much whether or not you do the in-car or exterior car view, because it's just comfortably fitting within everything the emulator has to do within the clock cycle. Yeah, the way these games, and this was when EA already began to sort of suck. But this is actually from an era where EA still made some nice games. And after that they turned consumer unfriendly, I think. Yeah, but as you can see, you know, the corners, there are no smooth corners, there are no rounded corners, they're just lines that are at quite a substantial angle. But it does give the illusion of smooth curves. But the textures used are actually quite nice. Oh yeah, this is also quite interesting. The introduction of rain and how it makes the imagery on the wind screen and on screen change. Quite realistic for the day. Yeah, but this probably is one of these 30 frames per second titles that is just running at that speed quite consistently. Also on the real system, because I don't think they ran at 60 frames per second. Whoops. But yeah, great looking game. I'm very much inclined to actually check out the PlayStation 2 version of that game with PCSX2, which has come a long way. Oh, an update? Yeah, sure. It's continuously being developed, pretty much like Duckstation also is. And again, I've actually ripped a lot of these games on my system myself. It was a huge task, but basically I have my entire library of games I have on I've running. So let's turn down the volume. And already the statistical information is present. Let's turn it full screen. Not sure if the graphics are rendering at rendering 1080p, 3 times native. So this is upscaled, and let's go full screen. Not sure if there's a view, full screen. Yeah, like that. Hopefully it didn't corrupt the render. So you actually see the settings of the emulator below. Let's go to the options. Basically it's the same interface. Audio, master volume, music, game music, speech and movie volume. Yeah, that's all music of the, yeah. So and yeah, so that's it. Oh, back video widescreen on, back. So basically we have to turn on widescreen. Let's see if that's possible. Settings, and then screen, widescreen, like so. Resume game. Right, and we can turn off the on the volume, and nope, and just have this quick race thing, and then circuits, and then resort, and then loop, this one, this one. Yeah, you can pick. So let's see how this runs enhanced at 1080p, and you can actually see all the settings. The Xbox emulator really is much more taxing on your system than the PlayStation 2 emulator, because that really has been optimized, continues to be optimized. Also the Xbox, of course, but this pretty much runs full speed, and this actually does run at 60 frames per second. And for some reason there's a lot more reflections and lighting effects going on. But you know, that may be due to the fact that pretty much everything has been implemented on the PlayStation, although it did complain about certain effects, blending effects not running properly yet. There's a setting that you can actually make it perform better, but yeah, you can actually see how similar this game actually is. But this does respond nicer to the user, and it's more immediate, and that's actually because it's running at 60 frames per second, so it takes less time for a frame to be drawn, so the system is actually capable of getting input from the user more, so it's pulling the controller a lot faster because of that. At least this system is now. So, and as you can see, there's a lot of stuff going on. You know, there's some sort of, it's not real time, but there is some environment being put on the textures, put on top of the textures. And it just looks amazing. I've not played this game on PC, but I would expect it to look quite similar. And also what you can see is that these textures, they actually are of a decent quality, so that the upscaling of them actually is not too bad when you go to 1080p. So oh, look, this is also the weather. No, but you know, Xbox, original Xbox, PlayStation 2, these systems actually were already HD video capable, but the TVs weren't there yet. It is possible for some games to actually on PlayStation also to output at 480p, and with things like Open Bootloader and stuff, you can actually force games to run at in HD resolution. Of course, the limiting factor is the amount of graphics memory and the game engine itself, because yeah, those games really not always like to be upscaled within you know, running on the hardware, just running a different setting. But I believe the Xbox as well, the original Xbox, it runs a modified Windows kernel, and the PlayStations, at least the PlayStation 2, it runs some sort of kernel mini OS thing, because if you look at things like OpenPS2 loader or HD loader, you know, you actually see that they manage to squeeze in or hijack bits of the console that read from disk. You know, they can divert it to read from an SD card or the memory card or an IDE hard disk. So there's some rudimentary OS going on. Yeah, and of course, for me, a large part of it is actually nostalgia, I guess, that makes me think this looks great, because I think a lot of younger people that have grown up with, you know, high resolution textures and just super high frame rate Fortnite, they might think, you know, this looks awful. I'll close the game. Actually, without saving. Outrun. Outrun is actually a beast to run on the system. Outrun Coast to Coast. Oh yeah, this is the Japanese version. It's also quite fun. Trilinear filtering is not set to automatic. It might break. Graphics, trilinear filtering, automatic. Okay, let's set it to automatic. Now this game on the Japanese PlayStation is actually one of the few games that actually is capable of outputting HD type video, progressive video, without it doing interlace. But this still is upscaled. The system is still doing this upscaled thing, like 920 by 1338. And then just, yeah, I'm just gonna, so this is more reflective of my character. So for this to run at full, you actually saw horizontal lines. That is something that upscaling PlayStation 2 games actually can suffer from. But emulating this game on the PlayStation, still doing it full speed, still is quite a task. Now I believe this actually is supposed to run at 4:3 instead of 16:9, because it is actually stretched out a bit. So I hope you can forgive me for tearing out your retinas because they want to squeeze it in. Well, on this system, this Ryzen system, it actually runs full speed. But it is not running full speed on all systems. It really needs to have very little interference from the OS, or just has to have a very fast system in order to just have no issues whatsoever. And there are micro stutters, you know. The thing is that the PlayStation really doesn't seem to have any issues when loading in the graphics or the textures for the new level, whereas the Xbox really seems to struggle, at least the emulator. But then again, also the way the PlayStation 2 hardware is, it's much more complex than and parallel than the Xbox, the original Xbox is. Okay, so this actually runs quite well, doesn't it? And I think it really runs great actually on this system. And as you can see, the textures, the graphics, you know, it's very comparable to the Xbox. But that's because it's actually running in progressive mode and upscale, because the original PlayStation 2, yeah, it's quite something, because I was in two minds about the PlayStation 2 when it came out. I mean, it was a great DVD player. I really needed that because I had one of these cyber home DVD players that sort of was a how do you say that, almost homebrew DVD player that used a PC DVD drive and some sort of blob on a silicon thing, and even some sort of video decoder that also was used on graphics. I mean, it was just a bit mess that had a lot of color banding. It didn't put out. It didn't have enough colors to output a DVD properly. There was just. I remember the Matrix looking quite color banded, and yeah, it wasn't good. But the PlayStation 2 was an excellent DVD player. It was affordable, and basically it was the first DVD player that really worked that I got, and I actually got the remote for it as well. The only downside I found was that from the first moment I actually got a PlayStation 2 and that drive tray opened up, I thought, oh my gosh, is this going to last? Because it's sort of, it doesn't sound very, how do you say that? It doesn't sound very reliable. Well, my system actually has been quite reliable when it comes to reading PlayStation 1 discs, DVDs and what have you, but PlayStation 2s really have had some issues with reliability of their drive units, and that was actually for me at some point the reason why I opted for solid state storage and or loading games from hard drive. So I actually on the system itself I got a version of HD loader pretty early on, even back in the day, even it was already, and I got one of these network adapters and I installed a fair few games on an IDE drive, which saved wear and tear on the optical drive. But yeah, and this runs great. This runs great. But you need a fast system in order for it to actually really work and really shine. But mini PCs can sometimes struggle. The Mac 1, the M1 Mac Mini, M2 Mac Mini, they actually run a pretty decent PlayStation 2. And this game also came out for the PlayStation 3. As a live arcade type deal, which is actually quite similar to what you find on the Xbox 360. So yeah, I mean it's a fairly decent, fairly decent emulation. RPCS3. Yeah, sure, why not? RPCS3, which is, oops, let's not, and let's load in the games. Now I've spent an enormous amount of time getting games off my PlayStation 3. I've captured and transferred a lot of my PlayStation 3 discs with help of an Asus DVD drive that actually is compatible with a bit of software that actually captures gets the files off a check for updates. You really need to check for updates after the games have loaded in, because if you do update while this list is not loaded in, you'll get an error. Basically hangs and just exits. Ridge Racer, yeah, Ridge Racer. The culmination of Ridge Racer goodness. Some people would say it's Ridge Racer 6 or 7 on the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 machines, and they may be right, but at the same time let me see, how do we set it at full screen? Ah, there it is. At the same time, there are downsides as well, but so this game really is the culmination of what Ridge Racer has become. There's no real proper releases afterwards. This is 7. 6 was out on the 360. On the there have been some other outings, but most of them aren't done by this team or the original team or they are just cash grabs and not really what a proper Ridge Racer is like. So let's check out a new Denver machine category 4 or Arge, Denver Arge. I'm at this point in the game where it actually is quite necessary to get some different cars, because this game has a lot of rubber banding. It's not only your skills, but also the way that you upgrade your car, deploy the nitro. And I'm actually running this with a 1080p window, rendering it. And the game actually natively runs at 720p. So already on the PC you can run it at 1080p. And the emulator just doesn't care. It just runs it. But yeah, this Ryzen that I have, 24 threads. Yeah, that really, whoops, let's turn down the music volume. But yeah, basically everything ever since Ridge Racer 4, with the glowing taillights, the music, and the drifting, pretty much ever since Ridge Racer Type 4 and Ridge Racer 5. I think Ridge Racer 5 pretty much cleared the way for these games, this game to be just like it is right now. And it's a very clean type of racing, and it's actually quite different from the original Ridge Racer. The original Ridge Racer had digital controls, came out in the arcade. It was running on PlayStation type arcade hardware, and yeah, I liked it because it was very fast. At the same time, I really didn't like the controls and the way the cars handled, but I still liked it. And the Ridge Racer series evolved. They came up with Rage Racer after that, which actually was a very nice precursor to Ridge Racer Type 4. The drifting had not been implemented like it is in this game, and you can also see quite interestingly how Rage Racer is a game that's pretty much used a way of rendering the graphics that was pretty much without any special effects or lighting in mind. It all looks very flat. I may actually show it in a bit. Whereas Ridge Racer Type 4, it used gouraud shading, lighting effects, baked in shadows and stuff, so it really made the game look more realistic. The PlayStation, of course, some love it, some hate it. I sort of in both. I'm in both minds actually about it. It's quite quirky the way the geometry moves around. The texture, jumping. It's actually quite interesting. So I got a car, right? So that's interesting. Profit from Arge. Got a race offer from Dig Dug Digging Trial. So yeah, it does improve the way that the games that you can run. So you can actually move around. Oh, there's a lot of... Oh, yeah, and you get your new machine. If you upscale it, you can actually see that the textures are actually quite limited. Also the way it's performed, like the water in the background, there's really a repetitious thing going on, but the lighting effects are excellent. So let's do the manufacturer's trial. Dig Dug. Yeah, let's see how that works. Enter the race. Machine connector. Engine tune-up. Stage 1. Sure. I hope I have enough credits. Tires and suspension. Stage 1. Yeah. Nitrous. Stage 2. Yeah. And just confirm the machine and start the race. So basically, what Ridge Racer wasn't during Ridge Racer, you know, the first series became more and more of a thing ever since Ridge Racer Type 4, I guess. You know, there's different car manufacturers. There's this backline story that sadly has disappeared from this one. Ridge Racer 5 does have a bit of a narrative behind it, but yeah, it's sort of an adventure game, and this is just, I don't know, it's just more, yeah, it does have a, it doesn't tell a story, but you actually make your own story. So you really need to get more cars in order to just be able to keep up with the opponents. And it does depend on skill, but also your skill is severely limited by certain cars if you don't upgrade or enhance. Or the thing is, your skill pretty much with this game pretty much is concentration, a feel for the perfect lines, but also the timing where you let go of your accelerator button and you go into a drift, and when do you deploy your nitrous. And often nitrous is best deployed to overtake, not when you brake. And also, when do you brake? You don't always have to brake. Certain cars are actually very good at, without any minding any physics or anything. Oops, of course my alarm starts to go off. Time for my medication, which I might actually forget now. Also, a thing with this game is that you really have to overtake your cars pretty early on in the race and stay ahead, pretty much stay ahead, because of rubber banding, the cars will manage to catch up with you. But if you don't perform well and become first pretty early on in the race, well, you really need to be very good at your nitrous, otherwise you're just toast, regardless of your driving skills. It's a weird mixture of RPG elements, leveling up. Yeah, and this car that's just now behind you is just, I'm not sure. It doesn't feel like it should catch up like that. Yeah, this bit is just straight out of Ridge Racer Type 4, but then other bits are just totally different. The cool thing about this Ridge Racer series, especially Rage Racer, R-Type 4, there's a PlayStation portable version of Ridge Racer, which is also quite nice. Might actually be technically more, how do you say that, more of a masterpiece than this. But oh, I forgot what I was saying, but you know. You also have to be very prudent about when do you start a drift, because you can drift in almost just about any corner, but it also slows you down. Drifting increases your nitrous. For some reason, the combination of asphalt and rubber tires just loads up your nitrous supply. I've yet to find out which kind of chemical reactions actually is responsible for that, but yeah, it just happens to be something that just is. Oh yeah, and this is also quite funny, the way that the track continues to be raced despite it being over. Proceed, top menu. So yeah, this actually is a very nice way to play. You won the Ridge Racer trial. Let's go to the save, cancel, save data, yes. So it's been saved, and I'll go exit the game. So let's go to Duckstation, and I'll show you Rage Racer. Download and install. Yeah, it's continuously improved, so you'd better. Rage Racer. It's best to do the NTSC version. Rage Racer. Full screen. This doesn't use an analog controller. This only uses digital controls, which is a major letdown for the early Ridge Racer games. It features a ton more tracks than the original Ridge Racer series, because the original Ridge Racer games just featured just a few tracks, which wasn't enough. It's only 2 tracks or something like that. There was hardly any content there. Well, a good track that you could race on, but let me see. I think car select, yeah. So the way that the color shading is and stuff, it's very basic. So the graphics, they look sort of bland. And oh yeah, this is just, oh, the music is just techno music. Yeah, but in a way it's almost like it's sprite scaling. It isn't. But yeah, there's a lot more tracks and more diverse tracks available on, and they introduced the drifting. And there are some fancy graphics like this waterfall. It actually uses some sort of transparency. But all lighting effects are baked in, so there's no real light reflecting on the surface of the road. And it also has a rudimentary implementation of the drifting mode. So if you steer into a corner with the gas depressed, your accelerator depressed, you let go, you start a drift, and if you depress the accelerator again, you get out of the drift and you continue. I always think these eyes look like Michael Jackson for some reason. Michael Jackson, Thriller. It's really weird. So, yeah. I mean, compared to the original Ridge Racer, the way this looks is actually quite good. There have been other outings, or Emotion Racer on the GameCube and stuff, but pretty much the PlayStation and the Xbox, they are the only ones that really have received Ridge Racer games. And it's actually, yeah, and you can actually apply more of a braking, accelerating type, regular type racing style. But yeah, Japanese racing games, arcade racing games, pretty much require you to drift, and that's not for all. So I pressed the accelerator. So yeah. So if you let go of the accelerator too early, or then you don't necessarily drift all the time. But yeah, as you can see, it's like the cars have a matte finish. There's no reflection of the environment whatsoever, and the screen is just some sort of black matte, dead-looking thing. The most colorful are is the environment, but there's no shadows. This is just the only lighting effect that you get, or perhaps there is a little shadow back on the bottom of the car, but there's no shadows whatsoever. And I'll show you the evolution. Oh, there's a baked-in black square underneath your car in between the tires. So yeah, that's sort of. So basically, it's just polygons that with nice textures, but no fancy enhancement. But I guess the geometry on the track is just it's very elaborate, much more elaborate than the previous versions. There's much more layers and much more geometry going on. So it has to come from somewhere. So. After this, I'll move up to Ridge Racer Type 4. You'll see the differences. Okay, and I'm really seriously hoping this actually works. This will work, because I've been test recording some new videos for a while. Oh, Michael Jackson. I think his makeup really is quite feminine. In Thriller. So yeah, it's different, it's very how do you say it, crude compared to the drifting in later and other versions of Ridge Racer. But these bends, these turns, and at the end of the track is actually quite similar in a lot of Ridge Racers. But yeah, you can see that I mean, it does look much more elaborate than the original Ridge Racers is, because I can show those as well. Let me see. Ridge Racer, the original Ridge Racer, why not? Full screen. Let me have a small drink. Sony Computer Entertainment of America. Well, this really was the bomb. Compared to many other... Oh yeah, and this was something that Namco introduced. Being able to play a game during the loading. And that's something that comes back in a lot of their games. Yeah, so the flag looks excellent. There's a lot of things going on. 2, 1. So again, the way this looks, you know, with the geometry and all the cars. This bit is very similar to what you find on the Ridge Racer Type 5 on the PlayStation 2, and there's a bit of drifting implemented, but not here. So basically it's a sort of, yeah, the things that work in later versions of Ridge Racer just don't work here, so I tend to brake a bit, and then you get to drift. So you really have to depress the brake, and if you drift and steer too far, you get into this oscillation thing. So, you know, it really doesn't feel that natural. Also because analog controls is missing. But yeah, this is actually, I mean, what we had prior is, you know, is just so very different. Need for Speed was a much more sedate game, and this has a lot of geometries, high buildings on either side of the road. So this actually, you know, was quite something. So let's do our this one. This really is a version of Ridge Racer that pretty much is the best from this generation, I think. It features analog controls. You can also have a version that uses a jog con. I had that version as well. It has a big knob in the center where a regular controller would have start and select and or one of the analog sticks. It doesn't feature any analog sticks. It just features that jog con thing. It has force feedback in that one, and you'll be able to steer your car with that jog on. And because the analog implementation is actually quite good, it really, your car really moves into the direction where you're steering. Now this really is, there's a backstory to it. Pretty much everything that you have on the later versions you have here as well. Multiple cars, a racing team, you can actually upgrade your car. You get different manufacturers, and also this coincided with some anniversary of Pac-Man. There's a lot of Pac-Man going on, and like many of the other racing games of this era, the screens are very, how do you say that, very sequential. So there's no jumping to a different spot. No, you have to just go back, go forth, go back, just page through all the settings. Now on first glance, here you have a shadow, and a lot of these are baked in, but here again you have a shadow, you know, another shadow. So there's a lot of lighting going on with different parts of the road, and it's all baked in, right? But different parts of the road have different. And here, if you just let, here you have the beginnings of a properly implemented drifting, where you just, if you let go in the corner, you start to drift, and if you depress, you get out of the drift, and you really get a very precise sense of control. That is just not as present with the previous versions, and it all has to do with the analog control, I guess. What they also do is that the cars, they actually have quite elaborate textures. They look less dead. I mean, the windows still aren't anything to write home about, but the cars, they do have, how do you say that, they become more complex when you when they get closer, and they get less complex when they are further away. So it does save a lot of processing power. So they can actually have your opponents look pretty defined, you know. and in the background they're just a couple of lines. Also, I think the first time that the tail lights, the glowing tail lights that sort of continue to light up, and they have this afterglow, also is something that occurs. But yeah, as you can see, very you can see where this comes from. You know, the Rage Racer, the tunnel really has already had some nice textures for the tunnel, but here you really get the shadowing and the lighting effects. And actually all of these tracks, they have a different atmosphere, and also different times of the day, different times of the year. And I believe the second or third track that actually has part of this, but also during sunset or sunrise, and that actually totally alters the way it looks. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah. Lunch? All right. So it's time for lunch.